In the silent space of space, a satellite was flying in Earth's orbit. Following the program, I examined the area of long-abandoned tracking stations, looked at inactive objects, noticed the degree of their destruction, photographed. The routine data chain was suddenly interrupted. The electronic gaze recognized an object on the surface of the planet. The alarm signal was transmitted via satellite to the nearest receiving station. A huge shaft sunk underground, divided into floors by iron platforms, was illuminated by fluorescent lamps. The station's computer came to life. The monitors of the work terminals in the control room reflected the lines of the received data. An object has been detected. Identification. The words froze on the screen while the system recognized the object according to the set parameters. The signature is confirmed. Search for available communication lines. The report flashed. There are no available lines. Launch of the General Protocol 06. The computer monitors issued a decision. Activation of the ES-77 unit. A warning from one of the systems beeped alarmingly. Accounting of ES-77 objects, the last module. The execution of commands has stopped. The last module was reserved for station security. And even Protocol 06 had no priority in relation to this directive. Activation of the ES-77 unit, the computer stubbornly decided. Termination of the operation of the ASR-06 station. A light flashed under the terminals on the box platform. The metal boxes lined up in a circle were empty. Only one showed signs of life. Computer commands unlocked the upper panel, pumped out the nutrient fluid, and removed the working tubes from the body of the module. The ES-77 facility is activated. The life support system of the boxes reported. The ceiling of the shaft began to move. Electric motors pushed the reinforced concrete slab along the rails, pulling it aside. A stream of fresh, cold air rushed into the room. At the same moment, the paw of the grappling mechanism came to life. The flat grips took the tank out of the armored box and carried it to the surface. The module is in the operating area. The computer waited for this report and the return of the empty tank, after which it closed the ceiling of the shaft. It remains to perform the last action. The program of the ASR-06 station has been completed. Stop the operation of the systems. The glow of the lamps went out softly, plunging the mine into darkness. For another second, there were lines of data running on the screens and warning lights on empty platforms, but they also disappeared into the darkness. It was cold all around. The stone surface felt icy under his bare feet, and the wind, skirting the low cliffs, pierced to the bone. The sky was darkening overhead, and the stars in it sparkled like small pieces of ice. The girl wandered in the dark, not seeing any roads, buildings, or a single living fire in front of her. Cold. He's going to kill soon. It is impossible to resist this. There is nothing around that could save you. To wake up from a long sleep and die under the night sky. A beautiful death. A shallow dip in the rock attracted attention. A faint semblance of a shelter. The girl climbed into it, sat down and hugged her shoulders. The starlight illuminated the stone plateau stretching to the horizon, huge potholes in its surface and collapsed concrete structures. Iron beams and fittings, bent and melted, protruded from the gray walls. The metal of the armor flaps protecting the embrasures was covered with rust and through holes. It seems that everything around was once a defensive structure, now destroyed and empty. It seemed to the girl that a shadow was rushing along the line of fortifications, but her eyelids were covered with frost, and her clumped eyelashes drooped under its weight. The shadow crossed the last few meters in one leap and landed next to it. The girl felt no fear. The deadly cold has done its job. Her eyes closed, and she fell into an icy sleep. Wake up. A pleasant voice made you listen to him. Wake up, wake up, wake up. The words were not pronounced monotonously, on the contrary, cheerfully. Wake up! A direct order finally followed. The girl shuddered, opening her eyes. Yeah! Eva, get off me! It was immediately heard.
What? The girl sat up and looked around.
The sun was shining in a clear sky, warming the stone plateau with golden rays, and she herself was lying on the warm side of a huge dog. His breed was clearly not clean, but the animal's muzzle showed a wide smile.
"Eva, wake up," the dog repeated. "It's time to go."
"You're talking." The girl was surprised. "Yes. You're a dog."
"And?"
The girl paused, thought. Shouldn't dogs talk?
"Why Eva?" "What is it?" she asked.
"It's written on you." The dog calmly nuzzled her shoulder. There was an unknown icon on the skin, the letters Eve, the numbers 0627, and also a barcode. "I see," the girl nodded. "And you?" "Call me Mark." The dog stood up, nudging Eve at the same time. "Come on," he ordered. "Okay," the girl agreed. From the edge of the plateau, where they both stopped at night, there was a gentle slope and a path. In some of its sections, a hard surface and a kind of steps could be seen from under the grass, and there was a beautiful view from here. Below, illuminated by the sun, lay a beautiful valley. The tops of the forest drew smooth curves on the horizon. The thin line of the river sparkled, and everything was drowned in greenery. But it was going to take a long time to get down, and Eva, after walking the first kilometer, wearily sat down on the ground.
"I can't. I'm sorry."
Mark immediately returned to her. "Legs?" "Yes. My feet were already bleeding. There were some pieces of iron on the road all the time." "Nothing." The dog waved his shaggy tail. "Sit on me." "Can you stand it?" the girl asked. "Of course." The question seems to have hurt the dog's ego. Eve smiled. Mark too. Both looked at each other with interest. "I'm sure you shouldn't talk," the girl said, already throwing her leg over his back. "And why is that?" The dog went down the path, not feeling the weight of the man. Eve shrugged uncertainly. She couldn't get her thoughts in order yet. The strange dreams of that night were firmly in my memory. There were many of them, different. Some looked brighter than others. I dreamed of some kind of laboratories, military bases behind barbed wire, all similar to each other. But she remembered the checkpoint of one of them clearly. Eva dreamed that she and several other people were sitting on the bus. She can see through the window how on the street the officer accompanying them is returned to pass after checking. "Comrade Captain, they are waiting for you in the laboratory. This is the 9th underground level," the lieutenant on duty says quickly. "Hurry up!" Flashes paint the sky red. You can see a wedge of fighters flying at low altitude over the base. "Everyone, go ahead! Let's go!" The lieutenant waves frantically. The captain runs back to the cabin. The driver presses on the gas and the bus pulls up at speed to the open gates of a large hangar. There are a lot of spotlights shining around. Soldiers are helping people out, taking bags out of their hands. "Follow me in an orderly manner," their officer commands. "Civilians, damn it! Didn't they teach you anything at the KMB? In line. There are 5 people in the elevator. They'll meet you downstairs." And something is rattling over the roof of the hangar. Dust is falling. "Eva." Mark distracted the girl from the memories of strange dreams. They were more than halfway down the hill. The dog had long since switched to running and was now racing along the trail in long, smooth leaps. "Are you hungry?" he asked. Eve thought about it. Yes, she probably wanted to eat. "We'll get to the woods. I'll figure something out," Mark promised. The sun had already warmed the air well when they descended into the valley. The road was still being guessed. A wide strip stretched among the trees, densely overgrown with grass. In some places it was interrupted by large pits, but it was not difficult to get around them. Mark, as promised, stopped at the berry fields and patiently waited for Eva to fill both cheeks. The girl had no pockets, as well as clothes, so she could only carry more berries in her mouth, and strawberries grew in carpets along the road. "You look like a hamster," the dog laughed. Eva shook her fist at him, but couldn't say anything with her mouth full. She was smiling too. "Maybe we should just stop at a clearing?" she suggested after chewing another portion. "We shouldn't stay in one place," Mark shook his head. "And here?" Eve tugged at his ear insistently when she saw the lake. Clear water sparkled off the road. Just for a little while, the dog agreed. The girl took longer than planned. While I washed up, I splashed around. While I was picking burdocks, I wrapped my legs in them and wrapped long shoots of grass around them. "Bast shoes," she shrugged at Mark's questioning look. "They'll hold out for a while." The dog began to smile. "You look good." "What do you mean?" "Naked in bast shoes." Eve laughed, and Mark suddenly sniffed the air and visibly tensed. "What is it?" the girl asked. "Eva, hide," he ordered curtly. "And in what?" "Eva, listen to me." And the girl was too shy to object. Mark's tone brooked no argument. She instantly hid in the dense thickets. A silhouette appeared in the clear water of the lake. There's another one behind him. After passing just below the surface, two creatures came ashore. Their bodies were covered with metal armor. Their paws were tall, and there were compartments for accommodating claw blades. 4 eyes shone on the flat muzzles, and the lower part of the head was molded, nothing like a mouth. "Robots." Mark greeted them with a growl. The fur on the dog's withers stood up. The stance became lower, the paws bent, preparing to jump. Eve stopped breathing. "These are robots. A lot of metal on the engines. You can't handle them, but..." The robots rushed, and Mark jumped on the back of one of them with lightning speed. The dog's jaws closed on the robot's withers, and the mouth sparkled. The fangs went through the armor plate and hooked electrical circuits, causing a short circuit. The robot was struck by a cramp, and the eyes on the muzzle went out. But the second one immediately went on the attack. His weapons were paws, all 4 of them, all armed with half-meter blades, and it turned out, this was not the whole arsenal. The chest plates parted, releasing the barrels of the machine gun. Eva, seeing this, jumped up in the bushes in fear. But Mark rushed towards the robot, right under fire. He darted to the side, taking the enemy's head with him, and suddenly dived down. The shots hit the ground. The soil flew into the air right in front of the robot's muzzle, depriving it of sight for just a second. And the next Mark was already clutching at its throat, biting into the neck wires. Under the fountain of sparks, the body of the second robot twitched for another minute, until finally the dog let go of him. Eve came out of her hiding place and stood staring at Mark in amazement. The dog smiled. "Will you obey me now?" The girl swallowed a lump in her dry throat. "I will." "Let's move on," the dog ordered. "I told you you can't stay in one place for long." "I'm ready." "So where are we going?" Eve finally asked.
To a safe place.
Mark went on, and the girl hurried after him. "To a safe place?" She did not lag behind on the way. "What's in there?" "People. Like you," the dog replied. "And who was at the lake? What kind of robots?" AU-32 combat units. Standalone modules. The program is the destruction of biologically complex objects. Man is the primary goal. Eve shuddered. "So, are they hunting us?" "Are there many of them?" "More than enough," Mark nodded. "The bulk is in sleep mode. The fighting ended many years ago, so they just have nothing to do. But if we pass in close proximity, they will be interested." "I see." The girl looked around cautiously. "Where are they from?" Mark shrugged his shoulders in a very human way. He was generally good at facial expressions and gestures. "They stayed after the invasion," he replied. "The invaders were defeated, flew to their planet, but the autonomous combat modules function according to their program, and they still do not know that they were abandoned here." "It's sad," Eve said. "Especially for humans," the dog agreed. The girl was not a step behind now. "I'm taking a shortcut," Mark chuckled. "A difficult one, but a short one." And with that, he turned off the road. Now they were walking through the thicket of the forest. Hummocks, broken branches, ravines, sometimes very deep, and so on until sunset. Towards nightfall, the forest ended, and the dog led the girl to the slope of a low hill, from where a view of the city. What's left of him? The ruins, which were once houses, intersected at the foot, preserving the pattern of the streets.
We need to stop for the night, Mark said. When it gets really dark, it's going to be cold.
They went down the slope to the remains of the walls in search of shelter. The street was covered with iron debris and the skeletons of burnt-out military vehicles. The muzzles of the guns were pointing in different directions. And among all this metal, Eve suddenly saw the remains of people. I didn't notice it right away. The armored suits of the soldiers, like the iron of the weapons, darkened and covered with a layer of dust. The earth itself buried the dead, gradually absorbing them. But the empty eye sockets of the skulls still stared out of the broken helmets. Mark found a building with a surviving roof covering, took the girl to the farthest corner and lay down on the stones. Eve settled into his warm side, hugging him with both arms. "How are you?" "I don't know." The girl looked up at him. "Mark, what if I am?" The dog looked inquiringly. "Everything is just metal," Eve trembled. "And I have a number on my hand like a factory product, and I don't remember anything. I woke up in some kind of mine. There are iron ladders everywhere. I don't even know how I got to the surface. The main thing is that I got out." A smile appeared on Mark's face. "And if I'm not human?" The thought chilled Eve. "If I'm not human, then I'm not welcome where you're taking me. And these robots, they're after me anyway, and you will be killed. Mark, what should we do?" She looked into the bright blue eyes of the shaggy dog, twinkling slightly in the evening darkness.
Eva,
He whispered, and rested his head wearily on his paws.
you need to rest.
The ruins of the ruined city fell asleep under the night sky. Sounds could be heard in the silence of the streets. Something was creaking, tapping, and pebbles were rolling somewhere. It was as if restless spirits still roamed the ghostly houses. The girl hugged Mark tighter. "Don't be afraid, Eva," he whispered. "I'll take you home." At dawn, the girl woke up to the fact that her shaggy companion was not there. But the stones on which she was lying still kept him warm, which means that he had been gone for only a couple of minutes. Eva stood up and looked around. There was no trace. She headed outside, out into the empty space. The same view, the same remains. A sharp metallic sound suddenly rang out behind her and the girl turned around. My heart clenched with fear at the same second. The iron creature, which looked like a 2-meter mantis beetle, made a chirping sound and rushed to attack. Eve screamed, but she immediately fell silent because Mark took down the robot in a jump and, slamming into the nearest wall, bit its thin neck.
Let's go, Ava, let's go! The dog spat from the iron fragments stuck in his teeth. These never walk one at a time.
The girl quickly jumped on his back, and Mark rushed out of town. "Are we still far away?" Eve asked. "No, just a little bit," the dog assured. He quickly passed the ruins and very soon was crossing a plain intersected by shallow ravines. The outlines of low hills were drawn ahead, and Mark suddenly slowed down, and when the craters began around, he stopped altogether. There was a field ahead, and the dog was in no hurry to cross it. The tall grass was dotted with patches of wildflowers, but sharp spikes of iron fittings poked out everywhere. Mark stared into the distance for a long time. "What are you looking for?" Eve followed his gaze. "I don't like it," the dog replied. "It could be booby-trapped. Let's go around the edge." "There may also be a mine there," Mark added his answer. "Such a huge territory." The girl was surprised.
The average speed of the miner robot is 60 miles per hour. There, look. The dog pointed with a nod of his muzzle. And then
The outlines of something could be seen in different places of the field. It was hard for Eve to figure out what it was. The sides are overgrown with grass, and the metal hulls themselves are thoroughly sunk into the ground. It was only by the protruding broken springs that one could guess that the car was turned on its side and hit in front of his eyes. The field was littered with them. "How long have they been dead here?" Eve asked. "It's been a long time," Mark nodded. "Well overgrown. But I think the mines they laid are in perfect order. Far ahead, the outlines of some kind of structure could be seen, but the girl did not have time to see it. A familiar sound made her turn around and freeze. The mantis robots were approaching them, moving rapidly with the gears of their thin legs. And now there were not one or two of them, but 6. "Too much," Mark growled and took a step into the field.
We won't get through.
Eva was scared, but the dog was already running through the tall grass.
We have a better chance here than they do, he said quickly. Mines with a magnetic platoon react to metal better than to living flesh.
But the robots were catching up with them rapidly. We moved in zigzags, circles, whatever, but bypassing mines.
How do they do it?
Eva shouted, panting from the air hitting her face.
They're scanning the soil. How else?
Mark replied. And how do we do it? The dog walked in the same way, abruptly changing the direction of movement with each step, pushing through the rubble of iron left over from the robot miners, the remains of fences and fortifications that crossed the field. There were several explosions behind them. The pursuers were still in a hurry and made mistakes. But despite the decrease in combat units, they continued the chase. And suddenly there were pillars in front of Mark and Eve. The low iron posts flashed with warning lights as the dog dashed past them at full speed.
What is this?
Eve shouted. The line of protection! Hold on! The entire structure was already visible ahead. Iron walls without a single opening and rounded domes behind them. Judging by the size, it's a city, protected from all sides. Mark turned to look at his pursuers. And there were 3 of them left, and they switched to high jumps. At close range, the mantises calculated the trajectory, following the movement of the target. After all, the dog avoided the mines.
Eva, they've already seen us from the observation towers. Do you hear? Mark shouted.
So what? The girl did not understand.
You will be met. Run.
Mark stopped abruptly, plowing the ground with his paws and threw Eve off him. She rolled forward in a somersault, and the dog turned his chest towards his pursuers.
Run! His shout was drowned out by the iron clang of the robots.
Abruptly changing direction before the attack, Mark struck from the side, throwing one mantis at another, and flying over both in a jump, clung to the neck of the third. All the pursuers were in one tangle. Eva got to her feet and backed away, but she couldn't run. She didn't dare. Mark will be killed. Flashing in the sun, a blade popped out of the robot's paw and he plunged it into the dog's ribs. A roar of pain rolled across the field. Eva sobbed out loud. Mark! 2 mantises fell on him, tearing him away from the third, but Mark did not loosen his grip. Instead, he clenched his jaw tightly and yanked the robot's spine behind him, tearing it out of his body. The mantis collapsed, and the dog grabbed the opened armor plate with his teeth and stuck its sharp end into the eye of another robot. A sudden flash flashed over the head of a sobbing Eva and hit the ground, knocking out chunks of soil. They opened fire from the wall of the building. The hatches of the weapon ports opened in the cast surface, and queues of anti-aircraft machine guns passed along the place of battle. The mantises screeched angrily. One of them suddenly left Mark and rushed to Eve. The primary target is a human being. The last thing she saw was the ugly face of the robot, taking over the light, and 4 red flames of rage. The blow brought consciousness into the darkness. The doors of all the laboratories were closed from the outside. People huddled in a tight crowd inside the premises. They took off their clothes, so they stood naked like babies, but no one was embarrassed by that anymore. Will the base withstand the attack? There was only this question. Otherwise, what good are we? It will hold. The accompanying officer of the group confidently answered the frightened people.
The system will resuscitate you in 10 years. Everything will be according to plan. These creatures will not succeed in exterminating humanity.
The doctors were still fussing between long-term sleep modules. Negotiations with the rest of the floors of the complex were going on over the speakerphone. Let's launch the first group. It was coming from the speakers in the control room. Adelaide, Protocol 01. The recognition signature has been transmitted to the ASR-01 station. Explosions were booming from above. Despite the huge thickness of the earth above the laboratory, the vibrations still reached, You have all the instructions. You are the best specialists, the captain was saying. If we fail to contain the alien invasion now, if we die out from biological, chemical, nuclear, or any other attacks, then in 10 years you will restore our race. You will not get hurt. You will remain healthy, strong people, and you will take the second blow, if I have to. The dispatcher's voices echoed around the floor. Launch of the second group. Beatrice, Protocol 02. The recognition signature has been transmitted. The senior doctor approached the military. Everything is ready, give the command, he said. Distribute to the assigned modules, the captain ordered. Eve looked down at her hand. Number 27. She ran to her sleep capsule. The tank, filled to the top with a thick liquid, opened on command from the control panel. The girl lay down in a glass tub. The doctors took turns approaching each patient, injected catheters and gave the last 2 injections, a sedative and a radioisotope. Each group was given its own separate one so that later it would be possible to recognize the signal they emitted from the tracking stations. Eve was the last one. I managed to see how the housings of the other modules closed, hiding the already sleeping people under them. The doctors approached her capsule. "Comrade Captain," the girl called out while there was still a second left. The officer looked at her. "Don't give them the land," Eva begged sincerely. The captain smiled and nodded. "You are the last one in our company," the senior doctor told the girl. "Don't worry, everything will be fine." Launch of the 6th group, the floor manager began to transmit. Protocol 06. The code name is Eva. Object recognition signatures have been transmitted to the ASR-06 tracking station. The launch of the Explorer program has been initiated.
Good luck, the captain said.
In the hazy haze that clouded her mind, Eve heard that word. The last wish to a person who falls asleep before the future, when there will be no more war. Tanya woke up to loud voices. They were talking nearby. No, it's okay. She's been on her feet for several days. She won't be disoriented. I should remember the name by now. The girl opened her eyes. The big bright room was full of people. A young man of pleasant appearance bent over her. "Well, hello. How are you feeling?" "Where am I?" Tanya whispered in surprise. "City Life Support Base number 56, the young man replied. "If it's long and if it's short, House 56, our common name. I'm Dr. Andrei Plekhanov. And you?"
Tanya. Tatiana Denisova.
"You surprised us very much, Tanya." Plekhanov shook his head. "The connection with your base was lost about 5 years ago. She found herself in the very depths of enemy territory and frankly, everyone thought that there were no survivors there. Satellite scans showed that the base had been destroyed. Apparently, your capsule was located at the end of the floor, near the mine. Is that how you came to the surface?" "Yes," Tanya sighed deeply. "Are you from the Eva group?" "Yes." "It's amazing. You are the only participant in the program who has slept for a full 10 years, Andrei said. "The others were either resuscitated earlier or died, and you got to us. Did you get there?" Tanya jumped up. My head finally cleared up. Yes, that was part of their instructions. At the end of the sleep period, all participants had to wait for the guides and move to join the active military forces. "Where's Mark?" Tanya spoke quickly. "We came right to your walls. We are together."
Quiet, quiet, Plekhanov smiled. "Your Mark is battered but alive."
The doctor helped the girl up, led her to the window, behind which there was another room, and looking through the glass, Tanya froze. Mark was in the transparent tub. The sides of the dog were torn to shreds, but the arcs of the ribs coming out formed a shiny metal. "I haven't seen this model for a long time," said Andrei. "A rare specimen. He chopped up your pursuers for details."
Tanya still didn't believe it.
"A robot?" "Not really," the doctor corrected. "Living organs in a package of iron backbone and reinforced leather. Improved intelligence, model ES-77. He helped you well. According to the Explorer program, the delivery time for people to the base is a week.
He drove you in 2 days?
Yes, Tanya smiled involuntarily. Dogs don't talk. How did I not guess? Your brain was in a state of shock after waking up, Plekhanov remarked. Amnesia, perception difficulties are normal. He saved me. Is he sure he's okay? The girl asked anxiously. He will run for a couple of days, assured Andre. The display was glowing downstairs in front of the restoration bathroom, and Tanya glanced at the lines, finally understanding everything. Model ES-77. Name Mark. Source program Explorer. Year of manufacture 2050. Module sending station ASR-06. Activation. Reason: identification of the EVA signature object in the operating area. Task: search for the object of the signature EVE. Delivery to the base 56. Execution status: the task is completed.